In the video. Okay. That's it. We're ready for them to begin. I guess they're waiting for everybody else to log in because you can't see, because it's a meeting that they're sharing. You can't see who's in the room. But it says there are 51 people that are watching 3 hours ago, but that's just on YouTube. Who knows how many people are watching on the other platforms. I don't know when they're going to call the meeting back to order.
Okay, I am ready to be prompted whenever the team is to reconvene. I think people are now coming back on screen. Okay, Janine, are you prepared to continue on?
We are. Thank you, President Wynn.
Okay, hope everybody is refreshed and got a little sugar in their system.
Absolutely. Nice to be back with all of you. I'd like to welcome to the conversation Dr. Summer Stevens, Superintendent from Churchill County, and Tom Vander Ark, CEO of Getting Smart. Tom has been a valued thought partner with Nevada Succeeds on our Inspired Fellowship journey, and has a lot of expertise around implementation around some of the themes that we're talking about today. So the next 90 minutes are going to look like this. Dr. Stevens is going to give us a bit of an overview about some of this work that's happening up in Churchill, to just give us a sense of what it can look like, what it does currently look like in one Nevada context, and to give us a jumping off point for some conversations. We've heard earlier that Washoe County is engaged with some of this work as well, so it's exciting that we have multiple examples of things happening around the state. And then Tom and Summer will sort of engage in a conversation that will lead into a much more organic, open conversation. Tom, for your knowledge, our chat is closed for open meeting transparency until we actually flip from the slide deck to like a live Google Doc where we're able to be transparent with the chat. So we'll kind of be clear about when we move out of the conversation between you and Summer and into the facilitated space where you'll be able to engage with all of our participants, and they can have a more open conversation with you. And we'll definitely put the Google Doc up at that time. Okay. Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead, and Dr. Stevens, I have the slide deck up, so I'll share my screen, and please feel welcomed to cue me as to what you need. Okay.
Can do. Oh, thank you so much, Janine. I really appreciate it. And thank you, President Wynn, and the members of the board for taking this time today. It's so important, as we all know. So I'm grateful for what I heard this morning. I wanted to real quick go back to something that board member Ortiz talked about, right? With it shouldn't matter where you live. And I'm a huge proponent of your zip code can't determine your opportunities. And we live in a time that's absolutely, there's no reason for that to happen. And so that's really what drives our work here in Churchill. And I also want to say a big thank you to the Nevada Department of Education and Superintendent Ebert. I'm so looking forward to the Blue Ribbon Commission work, right? That's the rubber hitting the road. As Mike, I think before the break, you said, like, what's the action steps? Like, where does that occur? And that's exactly where that has to occur. And I'm super proud of my colleagues around the state. When I first came, I remember my very first superintendent meeting, and I was probably like, I've described myself this way, like a bull in a china shop. Like, that's kind of how I come into the situation. And I remember talking with them at one of the very first meetings, kind of around where was everybody with personalizing learning and competency-based. And just in the 2.5 years that I have been in Nevada, just watching all of their districts grow and change and work towards this space has been amazing. Yeah. But most of all, I want to thank the Churchill Board of Trustees and all of the staff in Churchill County School District. They are moving at breakneck speed for the work that we're doing.
Well, Churchill might be doing
they know I would have liked to have been there, like 3 years ago. I wasn't even here 3 years ago, but they are moving at such a clip that I'm just totally impressed. We've built capacity in the teacher ranks, in the leader ranks, and at the district level, and I'm very, very grateful for them. So when we look at our journey, the timeline of our journey, in 2016, the middle school at Churchill County School District became part of the Nevada 21 opportunity, which again was fantastic and phenomenal to move that particular building forward. As they moved into the next year, they also joined the Competency-Based Education Network, the Competency-Based Education Pilot. During that time, that was my first year here in the district, and we worked to develop our strategic plan through stakeholder engagement. We identified and the board identified those big rocks, and the board made a commitment to us thinking about school differently. We also, during that time, undertook one of the very important things, and why we're here today, our profile of a learner developed during that school year. Last school year, we as a district joined the pilot for competency-based learning. And through that time, we also worked to develop our learner-centered framework, which really is a competency-based situation, the approach to learning that we're tackling district-wide. Also in that year, our Board of Trustees adopted a budget model that focused on clear governing principles that included funding the strategic plan. And this is a quote: "Decisions shall be learner-centered. Budget decisions should be based on what is best for students, not the interests of adult stakeholders." And that's a big deal, because that's not typically how school has worked. We've said we're focused on kids, but sometimes the adults, their interests or needs and desires do outweigh that. Now, we haven't had a chance to implement that yet. We just adopted it last year, and then COVID happened and things got a little wonky, but we're looking forward to that returning. And then in 2020, as we started the 2020 year, we are now implementing and iterating our learner-centered framework across the district in K through 12. Our pre-K does use a very similar process. And then we've been beginning to train and implement on modernization techniques to learning, including landing pages, playlists, that sort of thing, which several other districts in the state do. Go ahead, Janine, you can advance. So this is our strategic plan kind of in a visual sense. We have 3 goals: implementing learning opportunities to develop life-ready learners. I was on a session last week for the Association of Career and Technical Education, and our presenter talked about, are we at a space where college and career ready isn't quite the right term anymore? And he was talking about that sometimes that hindering us. And I thought about, our life ready learning goal is so that everyone is ready. And that can include adults, that they're ready for whatever the context is at that given moment and the moment that are going to come. Because there's no way we can prepare children with the content they need. We can absolutely prepare them with the dispositions and competencies that they need to navigate the world beyond us. Our other goal that impacts learners directly is that we're developing the whole child through the intentional opportunities that we have. And finally, the goal around communicating and engaging our stakeholders better to be a team, in this work. So this is where the board identified those big rocks. And the steps we're taking is to keep our board, who was already ahead of the curve. I know that Superintendent Ebert was out here and has seen them and met them and thinks about kind of their perspective on things. They were very well versed. We went to the National School Boards Conference, and they were just, I think, super validated that the work that we were starting and engaging with was exactly the right work. So now it's keeping them well versed in personalization and competency-based learning. and keeping the items that we're working on working individually, but also in unison, because that's where the high impact happens. There's lots of great things that have been happening for years in schools, but when they're in silos, they can't get the traction that they need. Next slide, please. So this work led us to theory of action, which is really, again, those goals. But I want to highlight for you, when we look at being life ready, focusing on individual whole child development, the partnerships and professional growth, a couple of those specifically do drill down in to if we do certain things, then those attributes and characteristics of the profile of a learner that we've created will be realized. And that's what will lead to fulfillment, engagement, and success for kids. So I think that's something that has continued to drive us as a system. Next slide, please. So here is our profile of a learner, developed in the 2018-19 school year, in the late winter, early spring. This profile, we're really intentional around the language of profile of a learner. So as we've kind of heard about profile of a graduate or portrait of a graduate, I had been familiar with that for several years prior to coming to Nevada. But what we talked about as our district steering team was, it's great that we want to give that that future story development and that destination postcard, right? Like when you graduate from here, these are these attributes and competencies that we would like you to possess, because that's how you're going to get on the path for success for your life. And we thought a lot about if we called it profile of a graduate, sometimes our adults in the system say, hey, I already graduated, so I'm good, doesn't apply to me. Or parents, nope, doesn't apply to me because I graduated. So we felt really strongly that we wanted it to be from birth till your old age in our community, that these are the attributes that we need in our system and in our greater system as a county, as a community. And so that's why we chose profile of a learner in our language. And this was the full profile that we created to start with. As you can see, we have attributes of critical thinking, inspired innovator, collaborative learners, effective communicators, global citizens, and lifelong learners. And when we started this work, you can see there's lots of attributes or indicators listed. What we felt was really important in our work was that because we hadn't had any conversation about it, in order to translate it out to the masses, we needed to ensure that we had a common understanding and a common vocabulary about when we said inspired innovator, this group of us, what were we originally thinking? And then, so that could build on to different conversations. It just gave us a starting point to create common narratives when we began to talk about the profile. Next slide, please. From that point forward, it's led to some additional pieces. Now when we share it with just the competencies or kind of skill sets, if you will, those overarching themes. And it's probably in a variety of places at this point, but our staff know that this is what we're looking for. And I'm going to get to instruction here in a second, but this is our brand. This is where we're moving. Our board's very comfortable with that. These are attributes that they want to make sure are what drive things that happen in our system. So we wanted people to connect, though, to the day-to-day, their specific grade level of learners. And so we different principals did different work with their staff to talk about. So at our K-1 elementary school, what does a critical thinker look like when you're 6 or 5 or 7? What's critical learning look like when you're 16? You know, what does it look like even at the district level for adults? This really started to build ownership, which we're very big about agency in the district, and just continue to grow agency in people. But this helped also, we spent a lot of time, we tried to catch people living these attributes. We had people send us things, you know, and it's something that we just have to be very purposeful about. You can't just make this and then just put it on the wall, right? It's the old school improvement days where you made the plan and then you put it in a binder and you put it on the shelf. And then in 5 years, you saw if you were, you know, making any headway. So we do keep this at the very forefront. And this is helping us with the look fors. And we're getting ready to transition a bit into the instructional model where we start to see these look fors. And I just was at a school the other day, and the teacher had her little picture of herself outside a student center of the room with the profile of a learner. And it says under her picture, "I am the profile of a learner." And so they know walking in there that their adult that they work with believes in that. And it's going to contribute to that every day when they're in that room. So some next steps to continue to imagine what's possible and consider how we support the growth of really great concept. I heard a board member earlier talk about the Education Innovation Collaborative. One of their concepts is selfpreneurs, right? So if we think about that, that's really what we want, right? This profile is that someone can really key in and engage in those strengths, those areas of needed growth, but move him or herself forward. And so I just think that's really an interesting concept for us to think about. Next slide, please. And this is really kind of our next phase then, is this building of an instructional model that helps continue to modernize the opportunities for us in our system so that we have very intentional opportunities to engage in school. One of the items earlier was, how are we going to get this all done in the day, right? I think Board Member Newbern and I think it was in some of the other comments. I think this is where it is our opportunity to completely rethink what that day looks like and what happens in that day, because we just know so much that we didn't know even 5 years ago. But it will be learner-centered to create those personalized opportunities to support being life ready. There'll be deliberate learning opportunities that guide students and support students as they try out different pathways to getting there. And that then we can ensure that we can talk about mastery or proficiency or whatever term people want to call it. I don't want to get hung up on the terminology. That's the beauty of what I believe is possible in the state, right? To move from how many kids were proficient on the SBAC, for whatever that means, to what are the skills and competencies that our students have, and how do we start measuring those dispositions and attributes and sharing that out? I know that we've continued to work with chronic absenteeism, which is extremely important when we think about, we don't want to lose any children. We want to know that kids are engaged and safe, but also we want to know if they're gaining these skills and attributes that are going to help them go to that next place when they leave us, because they're not going to be with us forever, right? They're going to leave. They're going to leave our K-1 building. They're going to leave our middle school. They're going to leave our high school. They're going to leave home. And we need to ensure that those skills and attributes are there. Next slide, please. So thinking about this and the change, right? So some of the things we've stopped, we're really trying to be purposeful and connected in our professional development. And we'll probably move from more long professional development to short snippets, sound bites, quick, accessible PD for all of our staff. We've talked about how do we engage kids in some of that PD as well. I think that's really important. We've stopped like just purchasing. We're really trying to connect everything back to our goal set. And then that lack of equity, right? That's the part that's absolutely important, is that we're giving a lens that we look very thoughtfully through every piece of what we do every day, so that we ensure that no one, people didn't love necessarily the No Child Left Behind constraints, but it's really the goal. No one's left behind. We can't do that. We've started connecting things more again to our strategic plan and our profile of a learner, that new budget process that I talked about, and continuing to engage staff in class and learning tasks that have to focus differently at times to the new instructional model and this profile of a learner. And so for us, what's next is growing. It's constant. It's learning what's possible. Lots of iterations of things. Probably everyone on this call did not grow up really that failure was success. We didn't, that's not what school looked like for most of us. There was a goal, we were supposed to attain it. And if we did it, work harder next time, to get it right. And so we live in a time now, though, that allows us to iterate. And thankfully, with the leadership at the department, I think that's what we're getting in school districts, this opportunity to iterate and try new things. I shared with the board back when school started the model we're using for our hybrid. It's different than some others have chosen to use. So we think it's important to try that and continue to monitor and adjust. And then the final piece for us is, as we keep working with some of our partners, you know, the overarching attributes of our profile, they're not the end all be all. You know, things change so rapidly. I think in a year's time, we went from there was no gig economy to now there is gig economy, and there's probably something that I don't even know about gig economy and how it's working, or, you know, in COVID times. But that just changes so rapidly that we have to be, it's just a constant awareness of our profile and what we're asking of kids and adults to ensure that they're ready. But it's a big thank you to our partners, the Student-Centered Institute for Educational Improvement. We work hand in hand with Dr. Steve Pradair daily, really, in our district. We work a lot with Modern Teacher, as do several other districts in the state, and then EIC, and looking to see how we can implement really in an innovative and incubator standpoint the Thrive Learning Labs coming up. So I appreciate the opportunity to share how we got that profile of a learner early, and then how we use it to craft everything we're doing moving forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens. I'd love to invite Tom into the conversation. Tom, you have such a wealth of understanding and knowledge and expertise around the theory of a graduate or learner profile, as well as the implementation of that. And earlier in our workshop conversation today, there's just a lot of questions and thoughts around, so what does it look like to actualize this? Like, where are we at with that? So I'd love to just open the floor for you to kind of connect with what you heard from Dr. Stevens, and kind of also give us, those of us on this call, kind of a more expansive view of what it looks like to do this work.
Thanks, Janine. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. I think, first of all, I want to give Dr. Stevens a standing ovation. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
I know everyone on the board and everybody else on the call, we deeply appreciate your leadership. That was as good a summary of a district leadership framework as I've seen, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I know that others on the call do, and I think we all look forward to interacting with you more deeply on both how can we support you and how can we help more people in Nevada and across the country do more of the work that you're doing. So, wow, it was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, for the kind words, and it's really great to be with the board. I want to say hello to President Nguyen. I really appreciate her leadership in Nevada. I appreciate her national leadership on communities at schools. Elaine, I remember the night when you were installed as board chair and made a generous gift at communities and schools, and for 3 decades, I've really appreciated your work in the West and nationally. You've stood for the 2 things that I think are most important in education, and that's relationships and engagement. And how can we walk alongside young people and engage them in interesting and meaningful work, and both through communities and schools and through your work at the state board, you've been a terrific advocate for those things. So thank you. And to Superintendent Ebert, I want to say a warm word of hello. I also, I deeply appreciate your leadership in Nevada for many years. The state's lucky to have both of you as well as the rest of the folks on the call. So thanks.
I didn't talk about the data yet.
I'd like to say just a couple words. I want to echo what Summer told us about the work in Churchill, and just talk about ways that we can support new goals, new learning models, and new leaders. First of all, the new learning goals, it could be argued that in the middle of a global pandemic, and let's acknowledge that this is not only a health pandemic, but an economic pandemic. It's a racial inequality pandemic. It's a climate pandemic that we have a set of stacked crises on that we're dealing with. And yet, in the middle of all of those, I think it's actually an appropriate time to reconsider the goals that we have for learning for young people. For 30 years, we've been engaged in standards-based reform. I helped to erect that system 20 years ago. It came from a heart of equity, of trying hard to identify young people not well served by the system, but 20 years later, it's a system that is preoccupied with a narrow definition of success. And as Dr. Summers laid out a profile of a learner, a rich and appropriately broad set of learning goals is really critically important. And I think in the middle of a crisis, it's a great chance to step back and say, are we really pressing on what's most important? Have we really given our teachers the opportunity to focus on those things that are important for life, not just for the end of year test? And I think the Churchill profile is as good as any that I've seen. And I've looked at thousands of profiles from around the country. Dr. Stevens, I'd love to just call out a couple of the things that I think Churchill does super well. I do appreciate that you call it a profile of a learner, and that it's for everybody, that it's for students, it's for parents, it's for teachers, and it says lifelong learning, and that it's learning for life. I love the fact that you have global competency on there. Not every small town would acknowledge that you learn in a beautiful place, but you're part of a big world, and that you want to prepare young people to contribute where they are, but also to be a successful citizen of the great state of Nevada, as well as an American citizen, but cognizant of the responsibilities that we have to future generations on planet Earth. So I appreciate that. I love the fact that you've got innovators on your profile, and your profile does a great job of incorporating entrepreneurial thinking as well as design thinking. We believe that this, along with critical thinking, are some of the most important new elements. The ability to spot a problem, not just be given a problem, but problem finding, and then the ability to structure with other people to frame a problem and to use a structured problem solving approach to address it. This is the muscle memory that we want to start developing in elementary school, to invite young people into complex problems, and to give them the tool set to know how to deliver value to their community. And they're doing that in Churchill. So it's a beautiful profile. I think there's a couple things that the state board could do to encourage more school districts to adopt a profile like that. I'm a big fan of the profile of a graduate in Virginia. The state legislature invited the state board about 5 years to develop a profile, and they built a nice one. It looks a lot like Michael Fullen's profile. Janine and Nevada Succeeds are a big fan of Dr. Fullen, and he for 30 years has been preaching the 6 C's. So in addition to creativity, communication, creativity, and collaboration, he's been adding citizenship and character. And Virginia took his lead and adopted a profile that looks like that. But they left room. They didn't prescribe that for every district. They left room for districts to have a community conversation and to incorporate the profile in ways that were appropriate for them. So I appreciate leading to show the intent of a broad set of aims, but doing it in a way that invited local participation in ways that felt authentic to local communities. So it's a crazy time right now, but there are things that you could do as a board to signal your interest in supporting social emotional learning.
What
as
is
well as
social and
these
emotional
innovation
learning?
skills of design thinking and entrepreneurial mindset.
Tom, I'd
Second-
like to invite our
Yeah.
our PDP facilitators to go ahead and move to the Google Docs, so that as we open up the chat as well, I know that you like to kind of have a more organic conversation. We have current members of our board, new members, member-elects on our of the board, as well as superintendents and partners around Nevada education that are represented here today that are able and excited to participate. Would love to, as they pivot to this Google Doc that will show the chat, just open up the chat for kind of some reflections on what you've shared and what Dr. Stevens shared as kind of a jumping off point. Noticing that our board feels, not our board, like everybody, the conversation theme has been action, maybe giving people opportunity to ask some questions and think out loud about what it looks like to move that to action when some people have profile work in progress and others maybe don't. And is there a right or wrong way to do this? And what could that look like? So I am just making sure our PDP friends are able to get the Google Doc up, if they're good with that. And I think, Jason, the chat is open, or the chat can be open, so that the chat conversation can kind of guide that. So I would invite our participants to go ahead and chat ideas or questions in. And Tom's really good at kind of like asking you to unmute and expand and pulling the conversation out from there. So I'll let you all take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. One, on this topic, I guess one instinct that we've seen that a number of state chiefs have had of grabbing some existing social emotional learning indicators and stuffing those into their old accountability system.
Yeah.
I appreciate the instinct of wanting to incorporate SEL, but it is it's probably premature to take new indicators and incorporate them into old accountability systems. So I would be cautious about that as a step, but I do think you can let the state know that you appreciate and approve of a move to a broader set of learning goals. And in a couple ways, you can encourage districts to do what they've done in Churchill and have a community conversation and adopt a broader set of goals. You can make available a set of measures that can be used. Some people are using a Panorama survey, for example, as a partial survey measurement of SEL. Measures like that could be subsidized.
Seeing that in the chat, Member Ortiz brought up a little bit about how teachers are actually adapting and adopting the change into their teaching methodology. Like, what does that look like a little bit more granularly? And also appreciating the support of where districts are and setting the stage for forward thinking.
Let me make a quick comment here and then turn it over to Superintendent Stevens. I do think it's critically important, once a community has started a conversation about learning profiles, to also begin a conversation with their school staffs about how they're going to live into that new profile. That's critically important, that you begin a second set of conversations with each school faculty and invite them to do a self-reflection on how they're doing at incorporating these new skills, giving them some guidance on the different ways that they can incorporate those new skills, and inviting them to think about what the work that they have ahead of them, so that they can more fully personalize learning and create a set of experiences that really develop these new dimensions. Just in the way we want to meet young people where they are, we want to meet each school where it is, and take that school on in effect, a competency-based journey. Dr. Stevens, it sounds like you're doing that so well in Churchill. Maybe you could talk about the work that you've done to help teachers understand the profile and then begin to incorporate it into their school models.
Sure. Thank you. You know, one of the things when I think about that idea, right, of moving it forward, that's definitely an area that I'm going to say we need to continue to really put our emphasis. We've worked on building our leadership team and building our capacity for them to do that at their site level, right? Because I mean, we're not big, but you know, but we're not small. We're in one town, but very diverse groups of people working at individual buildings. And so, you know, one of the things that I would say is we try to have a good overarching set of folks that were on the development or the district team to start with. And then we utilize our district staff to keep building, pushing, showing, growing opportunities to folks. And the profile, you know, ultimately when we first introduced it, it kind of was like, again, that thing on the wall. And it's just it's that continued effort to go back to it, You know, it's like the person who needs to try something at least 10 times. And sometimes people need 100 times for it to become, you know, you talked about the muscle memory, right? Like that's changing what the conversation is. What does it sound like when you're in a building in Churchill County? You know, that has to shift what it sounds like. What we used to hear, what we hear now, and what we hope to hear in the future, right? That keeps morphing. I sent a message to staff several weeks ago because, you know, some of the idea around continuing to move forward, this is like for some people the epitome of like it's the 180, right, to what they woke up the day before doing. And so this is COVID times and challenging times and trying to learn new skill times on many fronts. And I just let the staff know, you know, like I'm a pusher. Like I want to keep pushing because ultimately, right, this is about kids. And when do we wait until? When Alex is 47 and we are able to, you know, see those changes? Like it's imperative, right? It's at a critical point that we have to change. But I said, I want to meet you where you are because we all have to keep moving forward, but we're going to do it at different rates. Just like kids, everybody's going to keep moving forward, but I'm going to meet you where you are. And that's a piece for me personally, like for leadership wise, like I have to remember that and I have to continue to grow in that way because I am pretty myopic when it comes to this topic about what school could look like. And so that, and being real with the adults in the system though, I think that to me is one of the greatest ways to move all of this forward, right? Be real, be a human, and that's where the compelling part comes, right? So I think that you know, we keep putting it out there. We keep building it into the conversations. We utilize the professional learning community model to move ourselves forward with the learner-centered framework. So making sure it's built in there, making sure it's built into those things that we look for now as we grow into our instructional model. And implementing that, making sure that we use those attributes when we start looking at materials and resources. You know, I'm a huge proponent of open ed resources, but we're a long way from being able to successfully use those because people just don't have the skills yet to analyze all of those for these attributes specifically, and also how to tie that to individualized and personalized learning. So, you know, I don't want to say it's rose-colored glasses or like sugarcoat something that's not, because we have a lot of work to do. But I think keeping things at the forefront for people, and I'm going to say this, being relentless, like not letting it go. It's got to stay there, and that's something that I believe in, while still caring for our people because they're super fragile right now. And we have to protect them. at all costs, the kids and the adults. And so trying to figure out how to balance that. Somebody's better at it, maybe call me, because I need probably some advice on how to better do it.
Superintendent Stevens, I'd love to know, there was a question about the global aspect. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what that looks like. How do you bring the global citizen to life in the classroom?
Well, I think one of the pieces, again, with that, as we think about global, I mean, it's just anything beyond our walls, whatever that is. And continuing to show kids opportunities and paths that didn't exist before. You know, there was only one path to graduating before, right? Like, go to the high school, make sure you're sitting there. And then when the 100 days are over, we'll count that you were there, you know, and you'll get the diploma. There's lots of ways now to earn that. And so we do keep talking about multiple paths. I can tell you personally, I talk with kids all the time, like, is that meeting your needs? What else is possible? You know, how do you connect? And kids are connected in a way that we've never known before. They don't always know all of the right ways to connect, and that's where we can come in. But I think some of our district staff does a great job showing kids what's possible, having people from the outside coming in to be, you know, guest presenters, guest speakers, keynotes, is a way to show kids, again, what's beyond here. Because we have kids that have never left Fallon. I'm sure of that. Everybody has those kids that never left the space. We also try to continue to build with our partners here in our community to, again, show how does school and the business community in our town connect, because that is part of growing global. But again, another area that we certainly can continue to grow in and encourage people to use resources and opportunities with kids so that they see, I liken the term to the people in our world, they're representatives of what's possible. And so we need to have the materials we use and the kinds of lesson sets that we use have to show all people and what's out there. And we live in a different time. I'm thinking when I was in first grade, I'm not sure my teacher in a little town in Nebraska would have known anyone who was Jewish, would have known anyone who was Hispanic, probably anyone who left Nebraska sometimes. And, you know, the reality is that is not the world we live in. At our fingertips, on our cell phones, you know, on whatever, the world is literally sitting there waiting for us, calling for us to invite it in for every learner in our system. And I think that innovator concept, that's where we put risk taking. And we just haven't had a system in education that allowed for the adults to take risks. And again, I reiterate, you know, Joan has given us that, I believe, and now we need to give that to our teachers so that they can give it to kids. Like, take a chance. If it doesn't work, it's no, you know, we learn something. And that's, I think, why people don't necessarily go beyond their classroom sometimes or what they know. And that's a challenge for us to continue here in Churchill. But first we had to determine in our framework, our Learner Center framework, like, what were the most important skills and competencies for kids to demonstrate. So that's the work we are now. Now, as we move and we talk about how to grow and expand what they use and who they engage with to do those things, that'll be kind of our next big step. So again, looking always forward to my other colleagues in districts. I know they've got some great things going on to really be global.
Yeah, I would love to pick up on some of the things I'm reading in the chat here and see if we can draw some connections to that as well. And, you know, Member Workman, you had a comment around how the profile supports teacher efficacy, and curious if you might expand on that a little bit in terms of, and also looking at Superintendent Ebert's comment around some of the work in Lyon County, if there's some connections you might be able to make to this conversation.
Hi, Member Workman, happy to. Thank you for the opportunity, and certainly appreciate Dr. Stevens presenting what she's doing at our neighboring district over there in Churchill County. In regards to my comment regarding collective teacher efficacy, we know from John Hattie's work that that is the highest yield strategy or thing that can have the highest impact on student learning. And in a nutshell, in the way I understand it, and the way we understand it in the Lyon County School District, it is what is my individual belief in the potential of that child, and also our collective belief as community of adults who are impacting the learning of that individual student, what is our belief in their potential? And even earlier today, during our discussion with our graduation rates and opportunities and barriers and everything else, there is very clear evidence, at least in my school district, that is a place that we need to improve. If our students are going to achieve, we have got to have an individual and collective belief in the fact that they can. And so what Superintendent Ebert was referring to is, we've had visions and missions and statements and things like that for years. And I'm not by any means trying to belittle those. They are vitally important to organizations and certainly education institutions. However, we realized that we needed to take a step backwards in the Lyon County School District in order for us to move forward. And that was to really hone in on our equity and diversity policy and practices to ensure that we had a clear understanding of those. And as part of that, working individually with students and with groups of students across the district from all 18 of our schools to develop what we call a Student Bill of Rights. We recognize that our vision and the direction we were going was a bit impeded by the fact that we didn't all have collective understanding of what the rights were to our students when they are in our school district or in our individual schools. And so we have since developed what we call the Student Bill of Rights for Lyon County students. It is the rights that every single student has when they are with us in the Lyon County School District. And we believe that that is going to help drive us towards that collective teacher efficacy and those conversations where we have those adults working in our system with our learners who have that belief that every single child can achieve, every single child can learn, every single child can reach the goal that they have set for themselves. And so that's essentially what I meant by collective teacher efficacy and us needing to take a step backwards in order to move forward.
Jean, it's Elaine. If you don't mind, I would like to inject myself for a moment. I'm not really good at chatting.
Absolutely. Inject yourself.
But now that we have Tom here and I can take advantage of his big brain, I would like to pull back to like 38,000 feet above the sky, or in the sky, looking down, because I think Tom and I have global views of so much history. And I know the pandemic is blowing things up all over the place, and it offers us, really good opportunities for serious introspection and changing the way we do things. And whenever we have great societal challenges, everybody always says, well, education's the key, education's the key. And we know it can be an antidote to ignorance and rigidity and equity, which is why we all keep doing what we're doing. But Tom touched upon, and we've all touched upon, this notion of community support, which is the thing that concerns me always. And community support translates into local and to national and to international. And we never do anything in a vacuum of a political environment and trust. And right now, all the work we're discussing is extraordinary. It's so rich and detailed and innovative and valuable. But believe it or not, there might be a lot of people that would consider this to be a somewhat progressive ideology during a rather conservative time. And even some of the terms that were being used, like empathy and globalization and humility. I mean, we recently saw how there was an attempt to stop DEI training in federal institutions. So I know that it is in places like Churchill and Lyon, where we have angels, that have the capacity to get their arms around their communities and do meaningful collaborations. we're seeing great success. But we also are in a state, like many states, that have major, urban communities. Our Clark County School District is the 5th largest in the country.
Yeah.
I don't understand how we get these approaches to work there, and in view of what always seems to be insurmountable issues other than talking about this, ideal profile of our graduates. Everything that I've always done in every organization, I always go to not the how, because there's lots of ways to do the how. And these are exemplary ways to do the how. I mean, there are fabulous models, and we're talking about all of them, in the chat room. I always talk about the why. How do we get a coalition of the why in our communities so that people understand, for sustainability purposes,
You have to have
that this
rules.
is the right thing to be doing. This is the right way to go. This is when we go to our legislature to try and get money that doesn't exist, that they're not going to push back on things that are, being labeled in a way that they find, not to be politically correct. We've got great leadership. Obviously, you can see that our superintendent is far down the path here with this in advocating it. But this is the thing that would keep somebody like me up at night, is in how we can get success across the board, not with all the rich environments that we have that are capable of getting their arms around their neighbors and neighborhoods. But what about these other big places that are so institutionalized and so intractable
Entrenched
that,
in
you
failure.
don't even know to where to go first. So I know that's a mouthful, but that's kind of what has been distilling with me in this conversation. Did I lose you, Tom? Did I scare you away?
It's a big and tough question. I think I guess one of the things we've learned in the last 20 years is that there's no shortcutting the building community support if you want to do innovative work. If you want to innovate and not get fired, you have to really commit to community building. We supported the work in El Paso for the last 8 years, and a good example of a superintendent walking into crisis and having profile of a learner conversations in every part of that community, rallying support of the business and civic community, as well as the educators in that community, building a new profile and implementing, like Dr. Stevens, a whole child solution set that really benefited from really, really strong community support. And like Dr. Stevens, a mandate for a global education. It's now the largest and best dual language system in America. And for 5 years, the superintendent didn't talk about test scores. He talked about whole child. And guess what? It's now the best big urban district in Texas, and their test scores went up. But so did all of the other dimensions of their learner profile, a result of their active learning agenda and their really strong support from both the district and community
He's
group.
hilarious.
So
He's just talking
I
about
think
how
examples
certain
like that around the
districts
country tell us
focus on
that
the
the
whole
work can
child.
be
They
done
didn't talk
in
about the
our
data. They just focus on
urban
providing
centers, but
support for
that
the whole child and how they rose
it's
up
I think
and providing
mistake for
services. But when they
states
have to
to
talk about the data and pointing out all the
impose,
things that are wrong, then they
these
set back.
profiles right now, and instead we do.
Whatever.
They can be suggested, but I think it's best adopted from the result of community conversations, along with which comes the kinds of supports that President Wynn
Tear the
talked
ends
about.
off.
So
Tear the ends
the
off.
short answer is possible but
ends off.
challenging. There doesn't seem to be a shortcut to the hard work.
And what I also heard in your response was I wanted to highlight was the fact that the organic nature of the work too, needing to be seated by, at the same time, if the conversation's happening at the state level, and it sounds like there's lots of good examples where it needs to in order to kind of create the space for those conversations, they also have to happen in tandem, locally, organically, and what does that look like?
It's a great point. Let me talk a little bit about one of the points I wanted to make is I do think the state can play an important role in addition to signaling support for broader aims, is also supporting new school models, making it easier to do competency-based learning like Superintendent Stevens is doing in Churchill, loosening restrictions on seat time, making it easier to certify educators that might have a non-traditional, maybe work place background, but also public-private partnerships around new school models. Let me spend 60 seconds on the Texas high school project. We launched that 18 years ago when I was at the Gates Foundation, and it remains the best and most productive public-private partnership in America. It resulted in what are now about 300 early college and P-TECH schools. This is where students can earn an associate degree in high school. In the almost 100 P-TECH schools, they also get high-tech work experience and
dual education programs,
and often job offers. That was a state effort that was matched by local philanthropy that encouraged districts to start new schools that were important not only to their community but to the state. The legislature came alongside that and created a designation for early college and P-TECH and an enriched funding model to support those. So great example of a state supporting new schools, having legislation that made sure that they would be sustained. And today, there's probably 300 of those schools across the state. Dallas itself has an early college and P-TECH on every comprehensive high school campus in the city. So the state can play an important role in supporting the innovative learning models of the sort that we're seeing in Churchill.
The state can support.
That could be particularly important
vision.
right now in the middle of a pandemic. An example, a local example would be San Francisco has been pretty proactive about sponsoring more than 50 learning pods in the city. Many of those are with Boys and Girls Club and YMCAs, where families can have a space where they can share some of the custodial aspects of custodial supervision during times of remote learning. So this is a great local example. Indianapolis has done the same. Ithaca, New York has also been doing that. A state could step in and encourage support for these sort of innovative learning models that make remote learning work better for both learners and families.
Tom, as we kind of wrap this conversation up, what I'd like to do is invite all of our participants to chat in a question that kind of is lingering or top of mind while we have this conversation and kind of look at what comes up in the chat to kind of close this. You know, one of the things that really resonated with our fellows, that resonated, I think, with the conversation with Superintendent Ebert and looking at work that's happening in Churchill, is that when you engage in this learner profile, graduate profile work, there's a real clarification of values or the container that the learning is taking place in. Looking at some of the questions that came up, well, how is that affecting teacher efficacy? What does it look like in terms of language offerings? How is global education now coming through in strategies inside a classroom? It gives us the opportunity to make explicit things that I think are often implicit, implicitly felt, but not explicitly maybe driven to. And I think that what we saw in Superintendent
boy.
Stevens' presentation
She's
was
trying to use her
making
words
those
wisely,
values
but she's
explicit
ignorant.
can actually
Not making
lead
any
to
sense. She's trying to describe a
action
problem
steps,
that she's
different
really
kinds
not
of
willing
choices
to
in
address.
learning and teaching, shifts in budget. You know, I think I'd just like to hear from you while we pose the question to the participants. For our participants, what questions kind of are lingering for you top of mind in terms of what might be next around a graduate profile? And you know, Tom,
The federal government already has a
if
graduate
you don't
profile.
embark on this work, what happens?
I said the federal government already has a graduate profile. They know what it takes to raise a child or to help support a kid. And then, you know, Nevada's going to try and come up with their own graduate profile. They've already created several different structures for kids to.
How do we get more
pushed
Dr.
through.
Stevens? You do it by supporting Nevada Succeeds. I think leadership development is so important. I think young leaders, more than anything else, need a broadening experience. Right now, the field of education has a terrible talent development pathway. It's basically teachers will raise their hand and say, I want to be a principal. Then they go through a training program that has little relevance. Then they become an assistant principal, which is the worst job on the planet because it's usually taking care of discipline. And suddenly they're a school leader. And then Shazam, they're a system leader. Maybe they got a PhD along the way and they took some more random courses, but
Wow.
none of those things really prepare them for the work today. The work that looks a lot like the learner profile and Churchill, right? The complex problem solving, the community building, the collaboration, communication. So what people really need along the way is a broadening experience where they have a chance to learn with other leaders and maybe even learn about other places on the planet and how they're approaching this work. And so that's why we so deeply appreciate the Nevada Succeeds leadership development program. It's the kind of experience that I think every young leader in education should have an opportunity to participate in.
What would from your vantage point, yes, and it's being, so I definitely want to call this out, member Dockweiler and then member Hudson also followed up, like, so what is one first step that districts and schools can take to get this work off the ground?
Have a conversation. You can't shortcut that. You really do need to lean in and listen to your teachers, listen to your parents, and both look for the pain points and look for the opportunities. You've got both in every community in Nevada. Try to be responsive to the pain points, but also look at the opportunities that you're not taking advantage of, the assets that are right there in your community. Some beautiful local learning places that might be outdoors that more kids could be taking advantage of. An employer that you're not tapping into that could sponsor a P-Tech high school. But you gotta lean in and have that conversation. I know Dr. Stevens will have some great answers to that. Where would you suggest people start?
I totally agree about just starting, right?
Yeah.
You can always keep saying you're going to do it and never do it. So I think one of the most important things is leadership and the boards of trustees in school districts really trying to learn as much as they can. You know, I'm gonna tell you, I feel like I cheated. You know, I've been about standards-based learning for a really long time. But I had great opportunities to build my personalized learning and customized learning perspective over about the last 8 years. And I'd like to say it doesn't take that long, but it does take time. So I think if the leadership and the boards of trustees can engage in some conversations about what that looks like, you know, what are we talking about? What are those things that are out there? It's the stuff that I'm so thankful the board is on here today, right? To hear what some of those possible things, and we need our legislators to learn about these things that are possible, because those things don't change. But start learning and then start the conversation, because every school district has teachers who already get it. And we need to find those people. And if you're not talking about it, they're not necessarily coming out of the woods, because typically they've been smushed or silenced by their peers who don't want it to be different.
Yeah.
So they're not always, so I have
They're
the
talking about
conversation
the
and
truth,
learn
I mean,
as
but,
much
you know,
as you
they're
can.
not been held
You know,
accountable.
Dr. Stevens, I might add to that, and I'd love to actually toss it over to Superintendent McNeil if she's available to comment on what some of their first steps have been. But inside our fellowship work are some of the things you heard our fellows say today. They're prototyping, right? So there's this idea that the learning or the challenge could look different. What are the next small steps that I can take in my context, and starting to share that work. And so I think, you know, to speak to member Dockweiler and Hudson's thoughts too, the conversation leads to what's the next thing I can do to actually create a tangible product around this and start to move it ahead with teams of people, both in leadership and in the field. Superintendent McNeil, might you have anything to share around the steps that you've taken in Washoe to kind of give us a sense of what some of those actions can look like?
Absolutely, thank you. So here in Washoe, we're busily trying to prepare for the next iteration of our strategic plan. So this year in 2021, we've had to kind of pivot to a bridge strategic plan because our official strategic plan ended in 2020. And so we have a bridge document in place now, but what's important about the promise of a graduate within Washoe, we want to be able to go out to our entire community and have those discussions on what the promise is for our students, our staff, and our families, and really have engaging conversations, not only with that constituency, but as well as with our nonprofits, our business partners, because we want to build on the promise of a graduate, string it to our strategic plan, and then have those goals, objectives, and initiatives within the strategic plan kind of have double arrows back up to the promise of a graduate. But also importantly, when you're building your budget, when you're building your district budget, those resource allocations really have to be able to speak to what's in that strategic plan and the promise of a graduate. And your budget document, I know that, you know, it may seem like a dry document, but really your budget speaks to the equity, and it is an equity document. And so once we believe that your budget builds around the equity and the resources that you're going to be aligning to your promise of a graduate and your strategic plan, then that's when those really difficult and really important conversations can happen.
Thanks so much for bridging where you're at in that work to the conversation that we've been having. I'd love to open up the chat for some final reflections as we sort of close out this conversation, and thinking about even the earlier conversation that we had, starting with equity, the definition of equity from the state, moving towards the definition of global competence and what was significant to everybody in the conversation around that. And now thinking about, you know, an operationalizing step in developing a learner or graduate profile. What excites you? Or are you most interested in moving ahead, or seeing move ahead, or being a part of moving ahead? And I would love to just create the space. You don't have to waterfall it in, but just to create the space for you to share that in, so that we can allow that to kind of put a bow around this conversation for this moment.
Yeah. Can't really see who's talking because they're not talking, they're just typing and putting it in a document. But you really can't see the document clearly because you're a third party. And so she's just talking. What excites me about this topic? That's the question. Nobody said anything.
And as our participants are putting their thoughts together, Mike, could I invite you to also kind of, I know you've been building a visual model for us so that we can reflect back on this at a later date. Can you kind of take a moment to just sort of share out the key themes that you heard in the second part of the conversation today?
Trying to understand.
Like for the record, before Shanique, so in terms of the very impressive conversation that Dr. Stevens and Tom had in terms of the inclusivity of the learner profile. It wasn't something that was just limited to students, that everyone in the system had that same expectation.
Inclusion
it was
for all students. What excites
impressive.
them about that?
And as was the hashtag always learning. I think that's it's a very impressive thing to have in the age of social media, to make sure that's something that's universal and representative of their
His
district.
name is Mike Lang, L-A-N-G.
Emphasis on iteration and falling forward or failing forward. It was an important takeaway from that conversation as well. What was an interesting thing going through the chat and in this listening, though, Janine, was does this conversation change the colleges of education in our state and the teacher preparation programs overall, if this is the model that we're going to go toward? And if it does, how quickly does that change happen? Was something that, as I was reading things and as I was listening, I was contemplating, because it seems to be a different skill set that an educator would need to have in order to be successful in this model of the models that we're proposing. So taking risk and not being punished for those risks was also something that was there. And the teacher efficacy by Superintendent Workman, that was also an important part of making sure that not only the teachers, but the community in and of itself was involved in the conversations about how their schools look.
Thank you. It was a beautiful summarization. And I think in processing President Wynn's reflections and looking now at Member Dockweiler, using teacher practitioner voice to build up, always incorporating student voice, that it's challenging work. And it needs to be done organically through relationship building and those small tangible steps that people can take together to really define what the profile means and breathe life into it, not just have the profile be built and put on people, but that it's something that the people inside the work have a real stake in creating. And so seeing those comments kind of come through in the chat right now too is really wonderful. I'm excited by the discussion and the collective focus on creating the culture and opportunities for all students and professionals. When we speak to resource allocation on these types of issues in the upcoming legislative session, we should be aware of how the new funding formula can have an impact on this work and equity throughout our state, and how that's going to impact every student. And thank you, so many wonderful thoughts. And I think the purpose of, again, this workshop session was to convene multiple voices around some themes that the State Department is really looking at. Again, connecting equity to global competence towards doing that graduate learner profile work. From a Nevada Succeeds perspective, it's been a real honor to be here with all of you today and to share some of our learning and also help create a space for collaboration, which, as we look at the comments too, we know that these kinds of conversations followed up with action steps can really help create momentum for implementation around whatever it is that we envision. So with that in mind, Superintendent Ebert, I would really like to pass the agenda back to you. And thank you for having us today.
Janine, I cannot thank you enough for your facilitation. When we reached out and we were having that conversation a few months back, and I shared with you a year ago, this meeting 12 months ago was, not interactive, we'll say. We learned from our constituents. They shared voice on what they would like to see. And one of the things that the superintendents expressed was they would like to have an interactive workshop with the board. And I just feel so blessed to have not only the current board here today, but our future board members with us as well as leadership within the districts. We also have district leaders who, may become our future superintendents. So, Tom spoke about building muscle, bringing us all together, being transparent about the work. Phenomenal. Are we there yet? No, but I definitely see a path. I definitely see and hear what everyone has said today, and using what that learning that has been brought to the table from many of the superintendents. And then we also had Pam Teal join, Michelle was here, Robinson from Elko. You know, the majority of our superintendents were able to join today and engage in this conversation. Tom, thank you so much for joining today. It is always great to see you. And I think, you know, in another short year, you'll have some great material to see what comes out of this great state of Nevada. Because we're not slowing down, we're picking up. We needed to, as Superintendent Workman said, we need to take a little step back so we can accelerate forward, and we're doing that as a team. I want to give a huge shout out to Candace, Stacy, Jason, and Amelia. They have been populating the comments because we want to be transparent, and there was all this back end, which we won't go into, work that needed to happen. And again, Dag Ott, thank you for trusting us that we expect and hold ourselves accountable in transparency in our meetings.
Yeah, right.
Mike
That's
Lang, thank you very much for joining us. Andy, we haven't heard your voice, but we see your avatar there, and we know that you worked a lot behind the scenes. There you go. Great, thank you. Great to see you. Janine, and then I would be remiss if I did not thank our Chief Strategy Officer, Jessica Todman, who, you know, was there, Janine, you know, our early morning meetings, iterating what we were going to do today. She was amazing. Our 3 deputies as well have just Heidi, Felicia, and Jonathan are doing amazing work. So with that, I believe did I say Michael Lang? You're my buddy from so long. Okay, good. I have to say him twice because, you know, who doesn't love Michael? So thank you. And I got Stacy, Candace, and Jason. So with that, President Nguyen, that concludes our session for interaction today that will carry us forward over the holiday break and into the future.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any follow-up comments that any of our board members would like to make about this presentation or questions? We need to go back to our main screen if we can remove the documents, and there we are. Yes, Member Ortiz.
Member Ortiz for the record. So I just want to say thank you again to all of the people that presented. This year has been challenging, as you guys all know. We saw some graduation results that are a little disappointing. For those of you that are keeping tabs on social media of parent and teacher feedback on education right now, it's heavy, super heavy. And then, you know, what kids are going through. I watched a presentation last night that Nevada PTA did about preventing youth suicide, and it's all heavy. This has given me hope, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? I definitely like the title, Nevada Succeeds. It's portentous and it predicts the future. We kind of didn't roll up in a ball and just stay there cringe-like. Much continued on thanks to the work of the department and our very talented superintendents. So to the presenters and our guests, thank you for joining us today. That was a very valuable thing upon which to end this year and to give us great hope for the next year, despite what's coming down the pike. So thank you all, thank you. Okay, back to reality. We need to revisit our ACT assessment results. So we will return to agenda item number 10. And Dr. Bell, who else is doing this report? And Mr. Zutz, you're back on track.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Amelia.
They're on a public website. They're on a website.
Perfect.
YouTube, but they're not letting you log into their system and participate.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Zutz, and I'm the administrator in the office here at the Department of Education, overseeing assessment, data, and accountability management. In this presentation this afternoon, we'd like to look at the 2020 ACT results and at 3-year ACT trends. The administration of the ACT aligns with the department's statewide plan for the improvement of pupils. The administration and reporting of the ACT aligns with Goal 4, that all students graduate future ready and globally prepared for post-secondary success in civic life. The ACT is, yeah, you can stay, thanks Amelia. The ACT is Nevada's college and career readiness assessment and is administered as per NRS 390.600 and 610 and Nevada NAC 390.210 and 220. The ACT is also Nevada's federally reported high school assessment for English language arts and math. Next slide, please. Today's presentation outcomes are focused on equity and opportunity, the Nevada State Assessment System, and the Nevada 2020 ACT results and 3-year performance trends. Next slide, please. Equity and opportunity. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, was signed into law on December 10th, 2015, and is the federal legislation that governs elementary and secondary education. ESSA gives states, districts, and schools flexibility in providing high-quality education to historically underserved students. ESSA contains provisions that advance equity and excellence for all students. An example of this is the use of multiple measures for accountability, including assessments of students' progress. ESSA also provides funding streams for evidence-based, equity-enhancing approaches to reducing the opportunity gap. Next, please. Assessment requirements. ESSA requires all states to test students annually in reading and language arts and math in grades 3 through 8 and in science in grades 5, 8 in high school. ESSA also requires states to provide alternate assessments to the 1% of students with severe cognitive disabilities and to assess the English language proficiency of our English language learners in all 3 school levels, elementary, middle, and high school. Assessment results are used in the Nevada School Performance Framework, or the NSPF, and the College Career Readiness Indicator. Next, please. This is an overview of the Nevada State Assessment System and displays the assessments that are administered in each grade. The top row, horizontal row, lists the grades, and the left-hand column lists the assessments. Looking down the left-hand column, you'll see a red star next to the ACT assessment. And if you look across that row, you'll notice that the ACT is administered in grade 11. I'd like to mention that the ACT is administered in grade 11 on a single day. With the exception of the GANTS and the MAP assessment, which are both required by state law, all of the other assessments you see are administered to comply with federal law. Next, please. As mentioned, the ACT assessment is administered to all grade 11 students and fulfills both state and federal reporting laws. The ACT assesses the domains of English, math, reading, science, and writing, and is administered in early spring, usually late February in Nevada, on a single day. Next, please. Now we'll take a look at the ACT results and trends for English language arts and math from 2018 to 2020. Next, please. Three-year composite score trend. The ACT average composite score has increased in Nevada steadily over the past 3 years for public school graduating seniors from 17.6, in 2018 to 17.8 in 2020, from 17.6 in 2018 to 17.8 in 2020. Next, please. 2020 composite scores. This slide displays the 3-year trends of composite scores disaggregated by race and ethnicity. The 3 years of data in the table is graphed above each student group. Most student groups show positive growth on the ACT composite scores from 2018 to 2020, with the exception of Pacific Islander students who decreased 0.3 percentage points over the 3-year period. Next, thank you. This slide displays the consistent increase in high school English language arts proficiency, which has grown by 4.9 percentage points from 2018 to 2020. This slide displays the 3-year trends of English language arts or ELA proficiency disaggregated by race and ethnicity. High school ELA proficiency has increased for all races and ethnicities over the past 3 years. The 3 years of data in the table is graphed above each student group. While the all student group gained 4.9 percentage points from 2018 to 2020, the highest increase in ELA proficiency by any student group for that period was achieved by American Indian students who earned a 7 percentage point increase. They were closely followed by Hispanic students who achieved a 6.1 percentage point increase, and Black students who earned a 5.5 percentage point increase from 2018 to 2020. This slide displays results showing that high school ELA proficiency has increased over the past 3 years for economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and English language learners. The 3 years of data in the table are graphed above each student group. While the all student group achieved 4.9 percentage point increase from 2018 to 2020, economically disadvantaged students gained 6.1 percentage points for that same period, followed by students with disabilities who achieved a 2.1 percentage point increase, and English language learners who earned a 1.3 percentage point increase for the same period. High school math proficiency trend. This slide moves us from English language arts to math and displays the consistent increase in high school math proficiency, which has grown by 0.7 percentage points from 2018 to 2020. This slide displays the 3-year trends of math proficiency disaggregated by race and ethnicity. High school math proficiency increased for most of the student groups over the past 3 years, excuse me, with the exception of Pacific Island students whose proficiency decreased by 1.2 percentage points. As in the previous slides, the 3 years of data in the table are graphed above each student group. The all student group increased 0.7 percentage points from 2018 to 2020, with the highest growth in math proficiency achieved by Native American students who earned a 2.3 percentage point increase, followed by white students who gained 1.3 percentage points, and Black students who earned a 1.1 percentage point increase for the same period. This slide displays results showing high school math proficiency has increased over the past 3 years for economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and English language learners. While the all student group increased math proficiency by 0.7 percentage points, economically disadvantaged students made the highest gains at a 1.2 percentage point increase. Students with disabilities proficiency increased 0.7 percentage points, and English language learners achieved a 0.3 percentage point increase over the same period. Thank you for your time, and please visit the NevadaReportCard.com for your Nevada education data needs. We are available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Member Ortiz.
Member Ortiz, can you go back one slide? Sorry, you went through that last one really fast, and I wanted to. I apologize. I know you took it down already.
Amelia, I think if I heard Member Ortiz correctly, slide 17, the one before this one.
So can I just confirm something? Does this say that English language learners, only 1.9% of them are proficient in math? Is that what I'm reading? And students with disabilities is 3%.
Hello, did we get that question?
Yeah.
We did. I want to make sure, Member Ortiz, I understand the question. The question is, what is the proficiency of English language learners on the ACT math? And what is the proficiency of, was it FRL, economically disadvantaged students?
Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly, that of the students who took the test that were English language learners or students with disabilities, the proficiency rate was 1.9 or 3.1 respectively.
Correct.
It's really bad. Like really, really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the board on these results? Okay, hearing none, I will presume we have concluded that agenda item. We now move on to agenda 12. Do any board members wish to discuss items that may be considered on the future agenda? Yes, Member Newbern. You need to unmute, yeah.
Thank you, President Lynn. There are two items. I'm not sure if they would be at the next meeting or sometime in the future. One is where they both have to do with the pandemic and the school situation. The first one is, as we roll out the vaccines, I mean, what's the picture look like for us to reopen schools? I mean, what is that light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, are we starting to think about how this can actually happen? You know, how does, you know, the increase in vaccines enables? I mean, do we have metrics that we might be looking at? But, you know, what's the game plan for getting back to normal and reopening schools? And then a second topic, and we started to talk a little bit about this at the last meeting, is what testing is of value during the pandemic, especially when we're in a distance education mode, and we can't really control the testing environment. So, you know, what's the, you know, the national lens? What's the thinking on what can we do? Because at some point we have to figure out where the students are, because we're going to be in recovery mode for years. But, you know, what of the tests seem to be useful and what just doesn't seem to be useful? So I guess a general, you know, test item on, you know, what are we hearing from the field? Because I'm hearing a lot that it just doesn't seem useful right now. So I guess those two issues about what is the reopening game plan, and then what are our thoughts around the usefulness of testing, and at what point could testing be useful?
Superintendent, do you want to respond to that? your ability to have that as future agenda items.
We absolutely can respond to that in a future agenda item. Several different components, which I see my DAG saying this isn't agendized, so don't go down that rabbit hole. But yes, we can absolutely discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay. Any other subjects that you might wish to add? You know that you can always call offline if something occurs to you that would be of interest to have it added. Okay. That at this point, we now do our concluding public comment period. We would take it on any matter within the board's jurisdiction. Is there any public comment?
There is. One moment, let me pull it up. Thank you. Our first public comment is from Phil Kaiser, Vice President of the Washoe Education Association. Before the school year began in August, educators across the state, particularly in Washoe, were skeptical there would be enough substitute teachers because against all health recommendations, the Board of Trustees voted for in-person instruction. Washoe has been discussing the issue of the sub shortage for at least the last 4 years, and COVID-19 has certainly magnified the larger issue of people not entering education. We know many substitutes are retired educators and are at an age where they face greater risk if they contract the disease. The idea that enough subs would be available seemed illogical, and considering that many schools face shortages even in normal times, our skepticism was reinforced. As the semester wore on and COVID cases in Washoe increased, more staff and students were excluded from schools until we ended up at the end of November with a shortage of over 200 subs. In Clark County, even with full distance learning, there are approximately 900 daily requests for a substitute teacher. On November 30th, we were informed that help was on the way when the Nevada Department of Education and Governor Sisolak announced they would simply lower the standards required to receive a substitute teaching license. Now, the minimum requirement for a substitute teacher is a high school diploma or GED and a fingerprint card. That's it. Students will have their academic and social emotional needs addressed by substitutes who have no college coursework at all. It's also unclear the length of these licenses, 6 months, 5 years, can they fill a long-term position? Critics of public education have long said that we are simply glorified babysitters, and evidently the Department of Education and the governor agree. Except there is no glory either. This proposal undermines and devalues the professionalism of educators in Nevada and potentially harms not only students, but also the public perception of education in our state. The question now becomes, what is the purpose of our public schools? From this decision, it appears schools are simply daycare facilities, a place for students to go so parents and guardians are able to work. This decision does not honor the mission of the Washoe County School District, which calls for providing quality education that prepares all children for a successful future. This certainly cannot be said to be a best practice for educators or districts, as there is no qualified staff engaging students in content learning. Substitute teaching is a demanding job that requires positive attitudes, organization, mental preparation, flexibility, knowledge, and skill. Education is one of the most important professions in our society. That is why standards for education and certification have been established. Professional development is required annually, along with observations and evaluations that are extensive and rigorous. The Washoe County School District recognized the importance of professional development by starting this year with a full week of professional development for certified educators to prepare for the vastly different school structure. One of the many items discussed included the social emotional learning for our students. By simply requiring a high school diploma or GED, this very important aspect of an educator's role has been thrown out the window. Educators are working harder and smarter than they ever have, and we are tired. We are not just tired because of the countless hours spent ensuring our kids have us there to teach and guide, but we are tired of the words. We're tired of hearing about how essential we are, but then seeing policies like this that devalue everything we do. We're tired of seeing how the economy runs through our schools, but then not being put near the front of the vaccine schedule so that we can return to in-person instruction. We're tired of being called heroes and not receiving the support we deserve when we demand the officials listen to educators. Educators are tired, but we're still not the ones who need a wake-up call. The next item is submitted by NSEA. The Nevada State Education Association has been the voice of Nevada educators for over 100 years. NSEA represents the majority of educators across the state, with members in every school district, in every Nevada school district, including teachers, other licensed education professionals, and education support professionals, ESPs, who provide vital services to students in Nevada's public education system. In our history, there have been a few more challenging times than the past year with the COVID-19 crisis. After school buildings were ordered closed last spring, NSEA members quickly responded with classroom teachers engaging their students in distance learning and food service workers on the front lines providing meals to families in our districts. This semester, our members are responding in a diversity of ways depending on their district and the status of the COVID-19 crisis in their communities. Some educators are back at their school building offering in-person instruction. Others are working in hybrid models, juggling in-person learning with distance learning opportunities. Many others, including in Clark County, are working to create meaningful education experiences through full distance learning. This summer, NSEA supported the work of the Department of Education to develop Nevada's Path Forward, a framework for a safe, efficient, and equitable return to school buildings. We felt this was the proper framework, along with a consultation with local health districts, to safely reopen and operate school buildings this school year. Educators, as much as anyone else, appreciate the importance of returning to school for in-person learning. Distance education is not an ideal replacement for in-person classroom learning for most educators and students, and educators are concerned about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis is having on education equity. Top concerns with full distance learning include providing the same level of education for all students, the complexity of teaching students with disabilities, and absenteeism. Also, most educators find distance learning and hybrid models more difficult, with more time required to teach the same lessons. However, educators also are very concerned about their health and the health and well-being of students. NSEA has consistently raised concerns that districts lack the resources needed to follow the recommendations to safely open and operate school buildings during the pandemic. And we know all districts have felt pressured to open or keep open buildings, even when the baseline lower community transmission rates were not met. This includes recent comments made by the student superintendent. Unfortunately, the decision to resume in-person learning in Washoe County was made earlier this year, where community transmission of COVID was above the baseline threshold and went against guidance issued by the Washoe County Health District. We know that Washoe County has experienced elevated COVID-19 cases ever since school reopening, including their highest reported case numbers in recent weeks. This includes a spike in the number of cases associated with K-12 students and school district staff last month. This number gave Washoe County School District little choice but to move to full distance learning for middle and high school students. With record COVID transmission likely to continue through the winter holidays, it will also not be safe for in-person education to begin in Clark County in January. With recent good news on the development of vaccines juxtaposed with the alarming increase in COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations, NSEA believes it will be critical to prioritize educator access to COVID vaccinations as soon as possible before safely reopening or returning to school buildings after the holidays. NSEA has asked the governor to make this a priority, and we appreciate any role the Board of Education can play to facilitate a safe return to school buildings next year. Thank you. The next comment is submitted by Jeff Church. Dear DOE Board, I am Jeff Church and was elected to serve as Washoe County Trustee, District A. A few comments for the record and consideration. OML. The U.S. Supreme Court just ruled in a New York case that the First Amendment still applies during COVID and any restriction would be narrowly tailored. You can go to a casino, but not a public meeting. I'd suggest that live Zoom-style comments are allowed by other agencies, and the state DOE should do the same. Likewise with telephonic, as not all have computer access, and the present model disenfranchises lower income and minorities. I do suggest an in-queue delay to avoid improper comments or worse. Recruiting teachers and staff. I note the recruiting task force meets in a few days. I taught recruiting nationwide and would ask to be allowed a 10-minute presentation so that that board at some point, or to your board. I would submit the PowerPoint in advance for approval. Niche report and New York Times report on Nevada education. Some like to quote the so-called niche report or New York Times study on education. Myself and others have debunked those, just Google them. The fact is based on ACT scores. Nevada is worst in the nation, and 2 reliable studies place us 45th overall. I urge all to stop referencing the Yelp-style niche report. It is the New York Times studies. There is none, never was. Info on request. Sincerely, Jeff Church. Our final comments from Hope for Nevada.
Nevada's on the bottom of the education system in
Dear
the
President
nation.
Wynn, members of the Board of Education, and the community at large. On behalf of our executive board and our 1,200 member organization, we would like to take the opportunity to thank President Wynn for her service and Nevada State Board of Education and for the level of leadership with which she has pushed for meetings the need of our children. When Hope for Nevada formed about 7 years ago, we met with President Wynn to share our vision of community and parent engagement that we aspire to cultivate. Her response to us was, "Show me, don't tell me." This motto perfectly fits the culture of her presidency, driving action from all involved in the education world through 2 governors and 3 state superintendents to prioritize the success of students. We've seen her encourage, question, support, and demand where necessary, and it has set an excellent example for other board members to dig in, sift through, and find solutions to longstanding issues plaguing the success of our students. Holding all of us accountable, from the families and students and school communities, the education professionals and districts, the Department of Education, and Nevada's business community, she has created a true shared responsibility for outcomes. This has informed our work with the legislature, another key partner for our kids. When that partnership was lacking, we have seen her take matters into her own hands, utilizing her philanthropic resources and business connections to act swiftly, as evidenced in the incredible feat accomplished by Connecting Kids Nevada, among countless others. We appreciate the enormous amount of time, understanding, empathy, and passion that President Wynn has dedicated to our state's future citizenry, and we're looking forward to the continued no-nonsense leadership that has been established and embraced by her fellow board members. Respectfully, Hope for Nevada. At this time, no other comments have been submitted.
Thank you. I'm certainly pleased that we ended on a bit of a high note. It was getting a little tough there at the end. So I don't believe in long goodbyes, and I certainly cannot extend my tentacles into the future of this group. But what I would like to share with you once again is what a great honor it has been and a privilege to serve the many years that I've been on the state board. If I had one wish, I hope you know that I'm not deserting you in a time of need. If I didn't believe that this was going to be in the long run a very fortuitous opportunity to make new and extraordinary innovations in education, I would be reluctant to leave. But I think there's so much now that is on the horizon that needs to be done. I would advise all of you going forward to indulge in some self-care. I know we've been focusing now on social and emotional learning, and I think we need to apply it to one another as well. It's very daunting to sit as policymakers and be subjected to so much bad news, but you deserve a break so that you can come back refreshed and take on the challenges that are going to unfold in the next few months. So of course, I'm wishing you the very best, happiest and wonderful holidays that you can muster. The only thing I would leave as my final parting wish, we have enjoyed, I believe, a wonderfully civil camaraderie as we have dealt with all these issues in these past many years. It's something that I think has been responsible for our ability to move forward without acrimony, because we've had mutual respect. And I hope that all of you have felt an opportunity to be able to contribute and to have an open mic whenever you desired it. And I would encourage you as you go forward to have the same kind of courteous respect for your fellow board members. We're never all going to agree on everything in the same way, but we certainly agree on the why and what we're there for. I also would encourage you to understand that our superintendent and the staff are the wind beneath our wings, and that if there are those moments when you feel that there may be some disconnect or issues that you don't understand, the proper time to get to the bottom of that perhaps could be offline, not to violate any privacy rules, but to truly understand what the issues are so that there's no chance for misunderstanding and certainly no public recrimination that might be misconstrued and unnecessary. I know that that's worked very well for me with 3 successive superintendents, and I hope going forward, however you choose to organize yourself, that you can maintain this wonderfully dignified and respectful environment and succeed, because our children and our families and our educators need that. So I wish you Godspeed. I thank you. I'm always available. I'm a Nevadan true and true. Anybody wants to solicit my input and any contributions I can make offline, I'm more than happy to do it. But Godspeed to all of you, and I will be watching you with great affection. So in that stead, I wish you and bid you fond adieu, and I declare that our meeting is now adjourned. Bye, everybody.